This is the Panasonic S5 IIX, and the X stands for extremely good at video. It's a hybrid camera. You can shoot stills with this. I would feel comfortable shooting a wedding with this. It's got 2 card slots, 24 megapixels, phase detect autofocus that our test found did pretty good. But this is really a camera that's going to be attractive to those of you who shoot some stills, but you're also very serious about video, because the video capabilities are literally professional, like filmmaker level professional. Of course, I'm going to compare it to the original S5 II, a $2,000 camera that's $200 less, but lacks some of those key video capabilities, so you can decide which one you should get. But maybe more importantly, since our initial review of the S5 II came out, Canon launched the Canon R8. And the R8 is only $1,500. And in fact, it has some features that the 2 Panasonic cameras completely lack. So you might want to consider this too. And Canon also lowered the price of the Canon R6. It was $500 more than the Panasonic S5 II when we reviewed that camera, but now it's the same price, and I think some people should consider it. We're one of the last big channels that has never accepted money, free gear, sponsorships from any camera or lens manufacturer. We do this so we can be completely unbiased in our recommendations. I will help you find the right gear for you. There is a company we work with that has similar ideals, somebody who just wants to see you create, and that's Adorama. Adorama sells everything you need to be a professional photographer, a filmmaker, or just an enthusiast. Whatever you want to create, Adorama is the first place to go. I started shopping at Adorama a few years ago because pretty much whatever you buy, they throw in some free stuff. And I like getting free stuff. But also, I found that they have really quick shipping, and the few times I needed to return something, I found their customer service is really excellent. They also have a lot of stuff in stock. So I believe Adorama is the best camera store out there, and I want to support them by shopping there and not at some big box generic store who doesn't really care about creators. So head to our links to buy any of this gear or any camera gear you buy, because that helps support a camera store and that helps support this unbiased channel. First, let's get into what makes the S5 IIX here different from its very similar sibling, the S5 II. And the first thing you might notice is the S5 IIX is just a little bit cooler. Look how Lumix there is blacked out. You can see it, but only because of the shape. All the letters and dials here, they're black or gray. There's only one splash of color, and that is the bright red record button, because that's what they want you to use. You know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of a murdered out car. Murder like a murder of crows, right? All black and kind of intimidating. Those aesthetics really do make it special to me, but it does a lot of other like practical video features that the S5 II does not have. Mostly they're the same. They both have the flip forward screen that hybrid shooters really need. They're both full frame 24 megapixel cameras. They both shoot full width 4K at 30 frames per second in a 16:9 perspective, or you can go to 4K at 60 frames per second with a pretty substantial crop. Unlike just about every other camera in the world, these cameras will shoot full sensor 6K video. That is 3:2 video. That is extremely useful for creators like us who have a YouTube channel shot in 16:9 wide, but we also produce YouTube shorts that are vertical, Instagram videos, TikTok videos. If you find yourself shooting both horizontal and vertical, being able to shoot full sensor 3:2 video means you can crop some off the top and bottom and produce a 16:9 video, or you can crop some off the sides and produce a vertical video. And you could do that with 16:9, but here it means you have a lot more flexibility in your cropping for the vertical video specifically. It just makes the workflow a little bit easier. For you video shooters, both cameras have a lot of video features that other cameras simply lack. Like, of course, it has a headphone and mic jack, but it also has a full-sized HDMI cable, and that's useful for connecting it to a field monitor or field recorder. Now, some cameras, like the Canons that I'll show you in a little bit, They use like a micro or mini HDMI cable, and what I find is those come loose, and that ruins your entire shot. And then everybody on camera has to reset and start everything over, and everybody on the production set kind of rolls their eyes at you. Full-size HDMI is an absolute must for anybody who's serious about video, and the Panasonic cameras are some of the only cameras that really give it to you at this price point. Both of these Panasonic cameras can record video for longer than just about any of the non-Panasonic cameras because they actually have a little internal fan built into this pentaprism up here. I've never noticed that it makes a substantial amount of noise. I've just noticed that it doesn't cut me off when I get a little bit too wordy. And when you've had a camera overheat in the middle of the shoot and you have to stop the full production and wait for the thing to cool off, well, you would pay just about anything to get that capability. So both of these Panasonic cameras give you that. Of course, both the cameras have two SD card slots. SD cards are not the fastest cards, but they're the most economical and they're generally good enough for recording video. This S5 IIX will actually record from the USB out to an SSD, to an external hard drive. I'll talk about that more when I talk about what makes the S5 IIX unique. Both cameras, well, they're good solid still shooters. They're great for portraits, weddings, general photography, but they're not sports or wildlife cameras. When tracking continuous autofocus, they max out at 7 frames per second. With still subjects, they can shoot 9 frames per second, but both those numbers are significantly behind all the competition. Panasonic lenses in particular are good for video because they're designed to minimize the amount of focus breathing that you have. They're also color matched within a set, which means color grading for you is going to be a little bit easier. Now I want to talk about the things that make the S5 IIX unique compared to the S5 II. I mean, the first is the price. It's $200 more expensive. That seems trivial to release an entirely different model with a $200 price point, but Panasonic didn't want you, the S5 II buyers, to have to pay a bunch for the software and codecs that go into this. The full HDMI port here at the side is shared by both models. But when you connect something like a Ninja 5 with the latest firmware to the S5 IIX, you can record raw video out. The raw video files are huge in comparison, but they give you much more information for grading. So you can recover the shadows more, you can recover the highlights more, and in a studio environment like this, you absolutely do not need raw video. But out in the real world, shooting run and gun stuff where you might suddenly be shooting front lit or backlit, or shooting somebody in the shade of a tree while you also want to capture the sky, that extra dynamic range can be a lifesaver. Under that same panel there, you see the USB-C cable. You can use that to power it. It supports power delivery, so it could run without a battery essentially indefinitely. But maybe more importantly, you can connect that to an SSD, a hard drive, and record your video, including really high bitrate stuff, to that external hard drive. You could have an SSD just for editing video. You could record directly to that SSD, plug that SSD into your computer, and edit directly on it. Using an SSD, especially with these high bitrate codecs, can save you a lot of money because you aren't having to buy high capacity memory cards, but you will have to rig some kind of cage to support the SSD, like strap it to your tripod or strap it to the camera itself. A company called Condor Blue has created a really elegant solution to attach your USB drive to your camera. It is this SSD handle. Unfortunately, the handle is not yet available, so I can't test it. Note that I did get this to work by connecting a USB-C memory card reader with a CF Express Type B card. That's cool because it's fast enough to allow the high bitrate ProRes codecs to work properly. A lot of us nowadays are asked to do some type of higher quality streaming. Maybe you are teaching yoga online, or maybe you just have clients who sometimes need you to do a live broadcast of a presentation or something. You know what, pretty much any camera, like these Canons or Sonys, you can just take a USB cable and plug it into your computer, and they immediately act like a webcam. So you could connect it to a computer and stream. The Panasonic cameras do this too. Unfortunately, they're a little bit behind in that it requires a separate beta application to be installed, something the Sony and Canon cameras do not require. But the Panasonics here have some unique capabilities in that they can stream directly themselves without the need of any computer. I spent several hours trying to get this to work and it failed. Is this going to keep streaming? Oh, I got an error. I contacted Panasonic and they said the iOS version of the app is not working correctly currently, so I can't test it for you. You can use the Panasonic cameras to stream full HD, that's 1080p at 60 frames per second, just over Wi-Fi. You can also tether it to a smartphone using the USB-C cable and stream at 4K at 30 frames per second. Or you could attach an Ethernet adapter, USB-C Ethernet adapter, and stream it up to 4K at 60 frames per second. Again, directly from the camera. The S5 IIX also includes some codecs, and that's kind of what you're paying for with that extra $200. If you already know all about codecs, it includes All-Intra and Apple ProRes, and you can skip to the next chapter of this video. But if you don't know, I'll tell you exactly what that means because it's kind of interesting. First, it's kind of built into the names. An interstate highway goes between two states, and intrastate highway stays within a single state. Inter means between, intra means within. So when we talk about all-intra compression, that means the only type of compression that's happening in the video file is within a single frozen frame. That is like a single still photo. So a single JPEG photo has compression, but it doesn't consider any other pictures, right? It stands alone. And that's kind of what All-Intra does. It takes a bunch of single images and stacks them into a video file. Now, a typical video file that you might record, like your MP4, those use inter-frame compression. They record a keyframe, which is like an entire standalone JPEG file. And then for subsequent frames after that, they just record the differences, whatever has changed from one frame to the next. And that makes for pretty effective video compression, and that means your files can be really small. But when you're editing a video with interframe compression, whenever you drop the playhead on a particular frame, the computer has to go back to the previous keyframe and then read every subsequent frame up to the one you picked to calculate what that one particular frame looked like. And that adds a lot of input-output to the storage medium, that adds a whole bunch of processing time, and that can slow down your video editing process. So All-Intra makes the video editing process more efficient for your computer, but it has less efficient compression, meaning bigger file sizes that are easier to edit. Now, for me personally, my MacBook has no problem handling 4K 60 or even 8K 30 video. And if there was some codec that was too much for it to handle, I would just select a checkbox and I would render proxy files and it would edit based on those proxy files. So I don't care about All-Intra. But a lot of video production studios demand it as part of their workflow because they don't want any bottlenecks to occur. They don't want to get some interframe compressed video file from one of their 5 cameras that they then have to do some special processing on, or that bottlenecks their editing system. So that's All-Intra, which is an option on the Lumix S5 IIX, but not the S5 II or most other competing cameras at this price point. The other option they're providing is Apple ProRes. Like All-Intra, Apple ProRes uses intra-frame compression, but not interframe compression. So every single frame is a keyframe. Apple ProRes is proprietary to Apple, and if you're going to use it, you have to pay them for the rights to use the codec, hence the higher price here. Because it's an Apple codec, Apple does a really good job of supporting it. In fact, my iPhone 13 Pro will actually record an Apple ProRes video. But my MacBook has special hardware in it to make it much faster to edit Apple ProRes codecs specifically. It has hardware acceleration. So if you're using an Apple workflow going to MacBooks, some production studios will require that everything is recorded in Apple ProRes. And with your S5 IIX, you can do that with your S5 II or your Canon R6 or your Canon R8 or your Sony a7 III. You cannot do that. So that's kind of what you're getting for $2,200. Both the S5 IIX and the S5 II, thanks to a new firmware update, offer live image composite. This is something the big guys, Canon, Sony, Nikon, don't offer. You can do long exposures and view the results in real time. So this is great for doing long exposures without an ND filter, but it's also great for shooting stars. Just to clarify, it takes a series of images and adds the brightest part of each image together. So it's good for star trails, but might not be good for all long exposures. The Panasonic cameras are excellent, but there is competition. Canon has been getting cheaper and more powerful, and I want to talk about some of the competition, but first, I want to thank our sponsor, Adorama. Adorama is my favorite camera store because they are creators like us. They really understand us. They're not some big nameless, faceless online store. Adorama is made up of creators. Creators you can ask questions of, like which lens should I buy for this? Which camera is the best for this? If you need support, they're there. They give you quick shipping with just about everything in stock. That's why I shop at Adorama and why you should too. And be sure to use our links, because when you use our links, that lets Adorama know that you heard about them through us, and that helps to support this channel and our unbiased reviews. So thank you for sponsoring us, Adorama. The R8 is absolutely an amazing camera for $1,500. The R8 will shoot full width 4K 60 video, which the two Panasonic cameras here, they cannot do that. Also, the autofocus, especially the video autofocus, is better on the R8. It pretty much 100% locks onto your eye, stills or video. That's something the Panasonics can't do. Even with the big telephoto lens, the R8 can track faraway flying birds as they move rapidly toward you. It is amazing for sports and wildlife, and that's not something I would recommend the Panasonic cameras for. So it's a better overall stills and video camera for the casual shooters. But if you need ProRes, if you need All-Intra, that's something you cannot do with the Canon R8. The Canon R8, it's only $1,500, but it has a pretty severe drawback. That's a little bitty battery and a single memory card slot. A single memory card slot spells doom for any professional. You can go years and not have a memory card fail. But imagine you were shooting video for somebody's wedding, and then you popped that card into your computer and it wouldn't read. It has happened to wedding photographers and videographers, and it really damages their career, and it really upsets the entire family who now doesn't have the professional recording or stills that they paid for. So if you do need card slots, Canon also has the Canon R6. Now this camera is a few years old, but it was originally $2,500. And for that reason, I didn't really compare it to the Panasonic S5 II when it launched, because it was 25% more. It was in a different league. But Canon has since lowered the price to $2,000. And in fact, if you go to Adorama, you can get this R6 with a $350 battery grip, all of that together for $2,000. And that is a pretty good price for a really good hybrid camera. Now, compared to the S5 II or S5 IIX, the Canon here has only 20 megapixels. So the images aren't going to be quite as sharp. But even though it's a little bit older, the Canon's autofocus, I found it to be faster and more reliable. And like the Panasonic, it has 2 SD card slots, but it can't do the cool trick where it records to an external SSD. You have to always write to the SD card. You also don't get the option of L-mount lenses. You get into Canon's closed lens infrastructure that is not open source. But Canon does have a lot of excellent lenses, and you can adapt Canon DSLR lenses and third-party DSLR lenses with pretty good effect. And if sometimes you need to shoot sports, well, this will do 20 frames per second beautifully, whereas, again, the Panasonics are limited to 7 frames per second with continuous autofocus. By the way, the Canon R8 does 40 frames per second, and it works great. Both these cameras shoot 4K at 60 frames per second with no crop. Now, with that said, the R6 will record for about half an hour, and then it usually overheats, whereas the R8, I only get about 15 minutes of it. These will record for longer, but 4K 60 has a really heavy crop, so you don't get the same depth of field. You might not be able to shoot wide angle when you want to. Whichever camera you like, be sure to go to this link at Adorama to pick it up, because they're creators like us. They can answer questions for you in real time, and they almost always give you some free stuff. That's an advantage over any other retailer. You just get more. They have stuff in stock, they ship quickly. That's why I like Adorama, but support Adorama because you're supporting a real camera store, and you're supporting this channel and reviews that are not sponsored by any camera manufacturer. That's what allows me to just freely discuss why a Canon camera might be better than a Panasonic camera. So in summary, $2,200 for the new S5 IIX is a crazy good price for a camera that can shoot All-Intra, that can shoot ProRes, that can do live streaming, wired, wireless, over Ethernet if you want to, for something that is designed for professional videographers to save you time, to save you money, and to make you more efficient and reliable. This is the camera I would recommend for somebody who is video first, who is professional, but also shoots some stills. As long as it's not sports or wildlife, definitely check out the Panasonic S5 IIX. Be sure to subscribe to see our upcoming tutorials and reviews. Thank you.